I'm sure in all aspects, like we watch all TV and we listen to news, and there is always the famous, well, science says, or the latest research points to this. And everything starts like this, and it's almost to convince you not to question it. And am I correct?
You're absolutely right. I mean, you could replace the word science with gospel, and the meaning would be the same. And as useful, I mean, there is no single science. I mean, people keep asking questions about this COVID business, and science is this. I mean, it's uncertain. The whole thing is totally uncertain. But you never see anybody come onto the screen and say, "Well, I'm a scientist and I actually don't know." I mean, nobody says I don't know, and that would be so refreshing if people did. But an anecdote: I have an old friend that I've known for years, and he used to be an expert witness, you know, in the court cases. He's an engineer and expert. And I learned from him that the main thing you need to be an expert witness or to be on television is to be decisive. You know, you have to come across as a knower, whether you really do or not, you know. And you're right. That's one of the problems with science right now.
Yes. And it seems like it's, instead of, and again, I'm speaking from my dog training experience and how much I know, but instead of starting to keep those people that present the papers and the research a little bit more in check, to me it sounds like there is certain areas where you're pretty much, if you have a PhD and you write anything and you cite the right people behind, this will get published. That's my feeling. And you're not really delivering nothing new even.
I mean, I should send you a paper. I just reviewed a book called, now what's it called? It's called Science Fictions by a British chap called Christopher Ritchie, I think. And it's about the problems with modern science, which are huge, absolutely huge. You know probably about the so-called replication crisis. Do you know about that?
Yes. But you should tell a little bit about it, so for the audience.
The essence of science, and science existed before statistics, and it's debatable whether statistics has been good for science or not. But the essence of science is, if you have a phenomenon that you're going to write about, the essence of science is that it be repeatable. You can do it again. People who read your paper can do it again, and so on. And when it was simple things like chemistry, it was pretty easy. Everybody knew what potassium was. Everybody had the same element, potassium. If you showed property X, somebody else could show property X, and so on. And medicine, much the same thing was true. There's a wonderful, wonderful book, the father of experimental medicine, Claude Bernard, written in the 1850s or something like that. It's actually on my website, who wants to read an English translation of it. But it's a marvelous book, and he had a wonderful theme or dogma. I guess it would be how to call it a dogma. He said, no exceptions, no exceptions. If you are going to talk about a phenomenon, it has to be demonstrable every time, okay? Well, now flip forward 100 years and to the invention of statistics, which was, I mean, the first steps in statistics were made by a very brilliant man, Francis Galton, who was I think half cousin or something of Charles Darwin. So he had, quote, good genes, I guess. Anyway, he was a brilliant guy, and he did all sorts of interesting work, but he started the idea of statistics as we know it today. I mean, there are other people earlier who've done simpler versions of it and so on. But his successor, or one of his successors, was a man called R.A. Fisher, Ronald Aylmer Fisher. And he worked in a horticultural unit in England. And he invented what's come to be known as the null hypothesis testing system. Null hypothesis statistical test, NHST. And the idea of that, which now has become almost a model for all science, even though it was a niche product in its day, and it should have remained a niche product. I don't want to give a long lecture on this, but the idea is if you're studying something that can't be repeated in the individual. I'll give you an example and a counterexample. Suppose you want to study visual acuity, how well people can see different things and so on. I reported in this article, when I was a graduate student, I did an experiment on visual acuity when the letters were black on white or white on black. Okay, you can do that with one person. You go back and forth, and you don't need statistics. You just need to look at your data and look at the result. And you can repeat it with one or two others to make sure the person you were studying is not an oddball, but that's it. That's basic science. That's what science is all about. But if you want to study something like learning or reading, how do you teach kids to read? Okay, you've got method A and method B. Well, you obviously can't compare them with the same kid. You train him on method A, and now he's ahead of the kid who just started on method B. So you have to compare groups. And that's become the standard method. You have one group that learns by method A, one group that learns by method B. And there are two major issues raised by that. One is, are the two groups really equivalent? That's why there's a lot of stuff about randomized control, and you have to pick this randomly, and you don't have a dog that gets in the way all the time. So you've got to make sure the groups are the same. But the second, and this is the big problem, is having concluded that method A is better than method B, you say, well, that's how people learn. No, it's not how people learn. That's how groups learn. That is how groups learn. And to get from the group back to the individual is really very, very important and very difficult. I'll give one more example. There's a field called behavioral economics. Some of you may have heard of it. The idea is that people follow incentives and so on. And the father, one of the fathers of this field, or two of them actually, are a couple of guys called Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, a couple of very, very bright Israeli guys. And they did experiments asking people to choose between different bets. Now, in none of those experiments did 100% of the people go one way or the other. But sometimes they got a statistically significant number of people that went one way or the other. But the conclusions that came out of it were people are risk averse, or people show confirmation bias or something like that. But not everybody did. And they did not do the experiments as Claude Bernard would have suggested to find out what made the difference. Why do some people go this way and some people go that way? To find the really invariant, constant thing about human nature, which is what they were after. In fact, what they were doing was public polling, opinion polling.
Yes, like surveys. This is
survey.
Very common way of making a poll and a survey, and all of a sudden going through the right channels, and it becomes
truth of human behavior becomes human behavior. This is our very nature is to be risk averse or whatever it might be. But it's as if you did a survey, found that 70% of the people voted Democrat and 30% have voted whatever, Republican. Say, human nature is democratic. Really? Nobody would believe that, but it's the same kind of argument.